Hi, thank you so much for joining tonight's webinar, Myths and Truths About Clinical Trials. I'm going to wait just a few more seconds, let some additional people join here. It is May 17th, and all microphones are on mute upon joining, just so that we can hear all of tonight's speakers. If you do have any questions, we ask that you please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Great, let's get rolling tonight. Next slide, please. And we have Justine helping us behind the scenes tonight. Thank you so much, Justine. I just want to make sure my view is correct, that it's the speaker view. If we can check that, Justine. Okay, let's make sure. Perfect. So the DCM Foundation's mission is to provide hope and support to patients and families with dilated cardiomyopathy through research, advocacy, and education. Next. Again, we ask that you please submit your questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we will have a Q&A session following tonight's presentation. Next. So first, we'd like to push forward tonight's first poll. Who is attending tonight's webinar? Are you a cardiomyopathy patient, a family member or friend, a medical professional, or an industry professional? Give it a few seconds here. Great, if we could end the poll and share the results. Wonderful, looks like we have more than half are patients, which is great. Family members and friends are also participating, as well as industry professionals. And so that's a great mix. Excellent. Next slide, please. So first, a little bit about tonight's moderators. I'm Jayanne Rock, the Director of Information and Education for the DCM Foundation. I joined the foundation in 2019. And what you may not know about me is that I am a third-generation member of the Framingham Heart Study, which is a cardiovascular study which was started in 1948. And much of the knowledge that we have today concerning heart disease came out of that study. Next, we also have Christy Johnson helping moderate tonight. She is a DCM patient and an administrator of the DSP Cardiomyopathy Support Group. She lives in Scottsdale, Arizona with her family. She is a former high-tech consultant, and in 2020, she was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy caused by the DSP gene, which can also cause both arrhythmogenic and dilated cardiomyopathy. She's now focused on healing, patient advocacy and support, and health and nutrition, and she is involved with a number of support organizations. So thank you for being with us tonight, Christy. Next. So let's run our second quick poll here. Have you participated in or considered participating in a clinical trial? Yes, I have participated in a clinical trial. Yes, I have considered participating in a clinical trial, or no, neither of the above. Interesting mix. Great, if we can share the results. Excellent, so about half have not considered participating or participated in a trial, but 30%, almost 30% have considered participating in a trial, which is fantastic, and 19% actually have participated in a trial. So thank you to all of you who've already participated or are considering it. So let's continue on. It should be an interesting presentation tonight. I would like to say a huge welcome and thank you to Bristol Myers Squibb, who has provided funding for tonight's webinar. Next. So for tonight, we have two webinar presenters. Stacy Alphas is a registered nurse. She is the patient advocate for clinical research and medical affairs with Bristol Myers Squibb. She provides patient insights to clinical teams to help in the design of clinical trial protocols. She also works closely with patient advocacy organizations like our own to help raise awareness about clinical trials in various cardiovascular diseases. and she has enjoyed the past 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry and previously worked as an oncology clinical research nurse. We also have with us tonight Sonomi Maruyama, MD and PhD. She is the Director of Cardiovascular Early Clinical Development for BMS. She completed her residency and cardiology fellowship in training in Tokyo and received her PhD for medical research on chemotherapy-induced cardiomyopathy. She has been in the pharmaceutical industry for 6 years. In 2021, she joined BMS and has been working on several investigational drugs for heart failure, including the Danicamtiv clinical study in patients with dilated cardiomyopathy, which we will hear more about tonight. It's very exciting. So I just wanted to let folks know that there will be 3 segments to tonight's webinar. The first is information about the phases of clinical trials and some clinical trial terminology to kind of set the stage for the discussion. We will then go into debunking some of the common myths that you may have heard about clinical trials. And for the third segment, we will go into some of the details about a clinical trial that is currently available for patients with dilated cardiomyopathy. So to get us rolling tonight, I'd like to introduce to you Stacy. Thank you for joining us. And would you like to introduce tonight's topic for everyone? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jayanne. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about a very important topic, the topic of clinical trials. And within that topic, without clinical trials, we wouldn't be able to have diseases to fight, we wouldn't be able to have medication to fight diseases. And without the participants in clinical trials, we wouldn't have any clinical trials. So we just want to extend our thank you to everybody who's participated in a trial and everybody who's thinking about participating in a trial. And we hope at the end of this hour, you'll feel more empowered, you'll have information to ask the right questions and consider participation or continue participation. We'd like to thank the DCM Foundation for this opportunity and looking forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacy. It's great to have you with us tonight. So let's go on. If you could forward the slide, we have Justine helping us behind the scenes from a technical aspect. So thank you, Justine. So tonight's presentation, again, myths and truths about clinical trials. Next slide. So first, Stacy, if you could talk to us a little bit about what are clinical research studies? Let's kind of start with the basics. What are clinical research studies? And what are the different phases of these studies? I'm always amazed at the length of this process. If you could talk to that a little bit.
Great, thank you. I think this is a great way to set the foundation to make sure everybody's on the same page and understands really the process, which is lengthy and complex. So clinical research studies involve human participants that explore how an investigational drug works in the body. You may have heard different ways to express clinical trials. You may have heard the terms research studies, clinical trials. They all refer to the same thing. During this hour, we will be referring to research studies for just simplicity. I also want to help you understand the different phases of drug development. So research studies are carried out in a series of steps. And they usually start from small phase 1 studies to larger phase 3 studies. So let me walk you through this a little bit more. So we start with phase 1 studies. Phase 1 studies are usually done in healthy volunteers. They are small, usually a small number of participants. And it really is the first time an investigational drug is tested in humans. Prior to that, there's animal testing. And the focus of phase 1 trials is really to determine the best dose and actually how safe the drug is in the human body. And some phase 1 trials do take place in patients or people that have a disease. But for the most part, phase 1 trials are
Jay-Ann?
Yes. Oh, I wasn't sure. Did we just lose her?
Yeah, I believe I'm just checking in if that was, I
Okay.
guess it's on her end that we've lost her.
As she tries to dial back in, Sonomi, would you be available to speak to this slide?
Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you.
So let's start from phase 2 part. So after phase 1, usually phase 2 is more large patient number to be studied. So this study is to further evaluate safety and also potential side effect of the investigational drug. And also it may be also possible to test one or more dose levels of the investigational drug to test that effectiveness of the study drug in that disease condition. So after phase 2, there's a phase 3 study. So this is also still monitor safety, which is known as a side effect of the investigational drug, and also looks at the effectiveness compared with available drug, which is called like a standard of care for that disease, or placebo might be also used to compare the effect with that investigational drug. And then usually phase 3 is called as a registrational study. So this data is used for the regulatory authority review and also consideration for the approval of the investigational drug. So from this phase 3 and phase 1 to 3, so this takes a long time, several years to a decade to conduct. And then even after drug was approved, there will be the phase 4 study to look at the wider safety over the time and also different condition. So this is quite a lengthy and also a rigorous process to assess the safety of the drug and also check the effectiveness of the study drug.
No, thank you, Sonomi. It's fascinating to know, and some of our audience may know, but I'm always fascinated that from the beginning of phase 1 through the end of phase 4 can take 10 to 15 years, which is fascinating to me. Great, let's move on to the next slide. Stacy has lost power, so unfortunately, so let's continue on and see if she's able to join us. Great. If you could talk a little bit to the difference between an investigational drug and a placebo. People always hear, what is a placebo? Some may know, but let's just review.
Yes, thank you so much. The first placebo, not all studies use placebo, but often used in a clinical study to see if the investigational drug has efficacy and also or not. So placebo looks like exactly same as an investigational drug. So this can be a pill or capsule or injection. So it's also like aligned with the investigational drug used in a clinical study. But the key point is placebo doesn't have any active ingredient, so it doesn't work as the same as investigational drug. So it's called a placebo drug. So it's a control.
Okay, wonderful. Next slide, please. And so that applies to this slide. What does it mean when a trial is randomized and blinded?
Yes, so blinding is the process after the randomization. And then randomization is now Stacy is back. So would you like to take over from here?
I apologize. I lost power.
That's okay, stuff happens.
Sorry. Thank you for your patience. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Sonomi. Thank you for covering that. So talk a little bit about randomization and blinding. So the concept, the idea of randomization is really like the tossing of a coin. Usually when there's two treatment arms, as we say, one treatment arm is an investigational drug. The second treatment arm is placebo. So a computer, what we call randomizes or flips the coin and allocates patients into trial 1 or trial 2, trial group 1 or group 2. That's the process of randomization. But blinding also, basically the computer assigns patients to different groups without the investigator, the patient, or the study sponsor knowing what group the patient is in. So, but we have no say. We have no say. It's typically a computer. But rest assured, we are able to understand what treatment a patient is in if we need to in an emergency. So at the end of the trial, everybody understands what treatment we're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Glad to have you back. Next, let's go to the next slide. And this is a really important concept, the informed consent form. Sonomi, if you could speak to that a little bit for a minute and the importance of it and what it is.
Yes. So informed consent form can be paper or electronic form document to help the people who is considering about the clinical research, to help them to understand the details of the specific research. So this document guides you through what can be expected during the clinical research before making a decision whether to participate or not. So important information such as what kind of investigational drug is used in this clinical research, and also we mentioned about randomization placebo. So those information are also described in this form. In addition to that, for example, duration of the study, and also duration of the treatment, and also frequency, and also schedule of a study assessment during the study, and then potential risk, also known as adverse event, and also potential benefit if there's any. And the alternatives to participation are also described. And the important thing is you can take as long as you need to consider and also understand about the research, and then make a decision. If you make a decision to take a part in that research trial, you will be asked to sign that informed consent form to provide consent for the study participation.
Wonderful, excellent. So it's really kind of like a master document about for the patient. Excellent.
That's right.
Thank you. Next slide. I actually have a few more questions here. We don't have specific slides for. What are the benefits and risks of participating in a clinical trial, Sonomi?
Yes, so all known risks and also benefit are also described in the informed consent form. And please keep in your mind that each person's experience is unique in the clinical research. So some people may experience a risk, like an adverse event, while others may not. So example of some of the risks which study participant may face are 3 types usually. So one is study investigational drug related. This is known as a side effect. And the second one is study assessment procedure related risk. For example, X-ray is known to be not good. Like contraindication for the female who is pregnant. So if those tests are planned in a study, such risks are also described in the document. And also a third risk is still unknown risk, may be there, because the study drug are still being researched. So these may include, but not limited to, would be risks to the reproduction, and also risks if the other drugs are taken together with these investigational drugs. And also in terms of benefit, there may not be any benefit for the study participant who is taking a part of the research study. As researcher, are still trying to figure out if the investigational drug will have any positive effect, good effect on the disease or condition being studied. So researchers hope that information they collect from that clinical research will help them to understand the investigational drug better to help researchers find potential treatment for the future patient.
Wonderful. And we're also hopeful of that. So
Yes.
thank you so much. So how, Stacy, how are patients protected while participating in a clinical research study? I know probably most folks are very curious about that.
Yes, thank you, Jayann. So there are a few ways that study participants are protected. And participant safety is really a very important part of the research process. So specifically in the US, we have the Food and Drug Administration, and sponsors are required to follow the laws and regulations set forth by the FDA in regards to research studies. And part of those regulations is ensuring a study participant understands the benefits and risks before joining, as Sonomi just described. All of the information that a patient needs to know before joining a trial can be found in the informed consent form. And it's called an informed consent form because it is informing the participant. Outside of the US, there are other regulators as well that sponsors need to be sure that laws are followed. So there's an organization called the EMA in the EU. And then there's the PMDA in Japan, for example. So in addition to the FDA and the laws and regulations there, every protocol is reviewed by an institutional review board at the facility that the trial is occurring. So an institutional review board is a committee of scientists as well as non-scientists. So physicians, scientists, community members, clergy, lawyers. It's a mix of people that review the protocol for the sole purpose of ensuring patients are protected and for ensuring no unnecessary procedures are conducted during the trial. So, like I said, safety and patient protection is very well spelled out in the regulations that need to be followed for every research study that is conducted.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't realize that, that there's a panel of folks like that. That's interesting. And then one more question for you. Why is diversity so important in clinical research studies or clinical trials?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. So this is a really important question. And, you know, in recent years, the FDA has shown a spotlight really on diversity in clinical trials. They've issued guidance that sponsors are implementing or reviewing and making sure that clinical trials are diverse. Now, what do we mean by that? So gender, race, age, ethnicity, those are important diverse criteria that sponsors strive to enroll into their trials. So why is that? The goal of research is to develop a drug or a medication to treat a disease in the community. So we need to make sure that the patients that were in the investigational study are the same amount or the same type of patient that is experiencing this disease in the real world. So it's ensuring that our trials are reflective of the disease in the community. So again, diversity, you know, it's really important. We like different types of patients to be participating in our trials.
Wonderful. That makes perfect sense. No, this has been very helpful as kind of like a baseline for tonight's discussion about myths and truths. So thank you for that. What I would like to do next is to go into understanding more about the myths, common myths that are out there, and maybe debunking some of those myths. And so for this portion, I'm going to now hand off to Christy, who will moderate this portion of tonight's webinar. Christy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jayanne, and nice to be here. I really appreciate your including me. And I think this is a really important part, right? Because there are a lot of myths that patients potentially, like myself, might hold. And so I really appreciate the panelists going through them. So I'm going to read a myth, and then one of our panelists will respond to the myth with some interesting information for us. So with that, let's go to myth number 1, please. All right. So Sonomi, this one's for you. The process is unfair because some people who try to volunteer for a research study are told by the research team that they are not allowed to be in the trial.
Okay, yes, thank you for asking this. Yes. So myth of unfair process is not true. However, it is true that all people who try to volunteer for the study may not be selected or accepted. So reason for this is because each study has a list of the rules. So such as age, sex, and also health condition that the people should not have to participate in that study. So these rules are to protect the study participants and also help researcher to obtain good quality of data from the research. So as Stacy already said, the safety is always priority. So people who do not meet those like a rule, which is already defined at the beginning, so if they meet those rules, unfortunately cannot participate in the trial. So those rules are different for each study and then also described in the informed consent form.
Thank you. That makes sense why you'd have such strong criteria. I appreciate that. Myth number 2, please. All right, so we're going to do myth number 2 and 3. We're going to read them both, and Stacy's going to answer us here. So number 2, research study volunteers need to sign an informed consent form that doesn't let them stop participating before the study is over. And the second part of this is participants will not be told anything about the study or treatments they might take during a study.
Thank you. So myth number 2 and myth number 3 are exactly that. They're myths, so they're not true. It is true that research study volunteers need to sign an informed consent form. However, there is language in the informed consent form that allows a volunteer or a participant to stop participating at any point in time during the study. In addition, the second part, so myth number 3 is a myth and it's not true as well. As Sonomi described, the informed consent form is the document that explains what study procedures a patient will go through, what the treatment arms will be, how long the study will be, whether the study is blinded, and then the randomization plan. And of course, it has language in there that protects the rights of the patients. So both of these myths are actually that myths. But just want to make a point here that a patient cannot participate in a clinical trial if they do not sign an informed consent form. Those are one of the rules that I just mentioned about the FDA. You know, we are informing the patient of exactly that, the procedures, you know, the types of testing that will be done, how long the study is, et cetera. So before signing an informed consent, it's really very important, as was also mentioned earlier, to ensure that all questions are answered. Any part of the consent form that's not clear should be clarified. So yes, very important. So this is all about the informed consent form. And I'm hoping you're understanding a theme here, that informed consent form is a really very important process, a very important part of the drug development process.
Yes, thank you, Stacy. And I did not know how important that informed consent form really was and how much it actually had in it. So thank you for describing that. Let's go to myth number 4, please. All right, so Naomi, this one's coming back to you.
Mm.
So clinical trials are dangerous because they use new practices and medicines, and I don't want to be a guinea pig. And that last part is true, by the way. I don't want to be a guinea pig. So can you please help with that?
Mhm. Yeah. So this is not true. The keeping study participant safety is always the priority in the clinical research. As we already discussed earlier in this webinar, so that the studies are reviewed by health authority before they start. And also institutional review board, IRB, also review the study protocol. And that they really focus on the safety of the study participant. Also, people in a study are very closely monitored, regardless of what group they are randomized to. So investigational study drug, placebo drug, they are equally monitored very, very carefully. And also, as we reviewed, at the beginning, so that the investigational drug, they go through very rigorous process before starting research in people. So those safety evaluation, the sponsor, industry, researcher try our best to investigate the safety as much as possible, and then make a very careful step next.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad to know so much rigor goes into that. All right, let's go to myth number 5, please. All right, Stacy. This myth number 5 is being a participant in a research study costs a lot, and these costs aren't covered by my medical insurance.
Great. I mean, I think this is great. This is actually untrue. So study participants rarely have to pay any costs that are related to the study itself. So any expenses incurred in order to participate in a study are usually covered by the study sponsor. So expenses such as parking, hotel, travel, meals, if the study visit runs over a few hours, all of those expenses are reimbursed by the sponsor. Receipts are provided. There's a process that the study center goes through to reimburse the patient. It's very important, really, to ask about these costs, again, during the informed consent process. It's very important for patients to understand this. There are procedures that do have to go to medical insurance, and those are procedures that normally would go to insurance if a patient's not participating in a trial. So, for example, if a research study requires 4 echocardiograms in 1 year, and the usual care is 2 echocardiograms, 2 echocardiograms will be charged to insurance. The additional 2 echocardiograms will be covered by the study. So just, another question to make sure that you ask when evaluating your participation and looking through the consent form. So this is a very important point. The whole idea is we want patients to volunteer. We don't want them to have to pay for that volunteer.
Excellent. Awesome. And yeah, and that probably makes a big difference for a lot of participants. Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, let's go on to myth number 6. Then Stacy, I'm not giving you a break. We're going to ask you this one again. So in any research study, a sugar pill or placebo is always used in comparison to the investigational drug. Keyword always there I'm asking about.
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, not all research studies use a placebo or a sugar pill, as we call it. Some research studies compare to standard or usual treatment, and a placebo is used really for comparison's sake. So when needed to compare, and as Sonomi most likely stated earlier, a placebo, again, as a reminder, is an inactive pill that does not have the investigational drug in it, but looks exactly like the investigational drug. So this is untrue. always is not true. Only if needed, a placebo is used. And again, a placebo is never used in lieu of an existing treatment for a disease.
Great, thank you. And as you mentioned earlier, this would all be outlined well in the informed consent. That's great. Thank you so much. And I think that's the end of our myths. So thank you both for the excellent answers. And I'm going to turn back now over to Jay-Ann to do our next poll. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for helping moderate those questions, Christy. I think it was very informative. I learned a lot as well through this process. Let's go to webinar poll number 3, which is, would you consider participating in a clinical trial? Yes, no, or maybe. We tried to make it easy. Let's just take a minute for people to respond. Excellent, excellent. If we can end the poll, share the results. This is very encouraging. So it looks as though a lot of the information that was shared tonight has really helped inform people more about clinical trials and maybe diminish some of their concerns they may have had. So now 53% say yes, they would consider participating in a trial, and 47% said maybe, and no one said no. So that's very encouraging. So thank you everyone for participating in that poll. And so next, this is a really exciting part of the presentation. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Justine. So now let us learn more about a clinical research study that is available for patients with dilated cardiomyopathy. And for this portion, Sonomi, would you please do the honors of telling us about this study?
Yes, thank you so much, Jan. So I'd like to introduce this clinical study currently ongoing by Bristol Myers Squibb. So next slide, please. So you already know about this information quite good, but let me rephrase briefly. So DCM is a disease of the heart muscle. The left ventricle, the main pumping chamber of the heart, became weak and cannot pump the blood to meet the body's requirement as healthy heart count. In general, that the heart became enlarged or dilated as the disease progressed. DCM may be caused and then caused by a genetic inherited condition or acquired. And also inherited means your parents passed a variant in a gene associated with the disease onto you. This genetic variant is also referred as a mutation. The number of the true number of the how common DCM is, and also a proportion of the causality by gene are not fully understood yet. Click next, please. So current estimates are that up to 1 in 200 people have a DCM. Amongst the patients with DCM, up to 50% have inherited the disease as a familial condition. Next slide, please. The current research have identified over 50 different genes associated with this disease, but the majority of the codes are linked to 16 genes shown here. Genes have the recipe of the to make proteins. Click next, please. So those are the example of the genes known to cause DCM and also proteins affected. So those proteins are mainly located in a sarcomere. It's shown as red and the blue band here, and also nucleus in the cardiomyocyte. Next slide, please. So let's talk about investigational drug in this trial. So it's called as a Danicamtiv. So Danicamtiv is an investigational study drug that the Bristol Myers is studying for this disease, DCM, in this phase 2 study. So in the previous studies in human and also animals, Danicamtiv enhanced contraction of the heart muscle. And also BMS is studying Danicamtiv in a phase 2 study, which is ongoing in United States and also Europe. This study has been enrolling patients with DCM with variant or mutation of the MI7 or TTN gene. So you might heard about this study in the past through DCM Foundation. So the last information is new. So that now the trial has been expanded to the individual with DCM with the cause not related to MI7 or TTN variant. Next slide, please. So we discussed about the list of the rules to enter to participate the study. So those are the partial requirements we can share in here. So for the patient who qualify for the study, will need to meet those following requirements. The first, age between 18 and also 80 years old at screening. And also, patients have a stable primary DCM due to disease-causing mutation in MI7 or TTN variant for each respective cohort. So group is defined by the MI7 or TTN gene condition. And this is new information. So patients who have a DCM with the cause not related to MI7 or TTN variant. So this is a requirement for the new cohort. And also patients have a stable disease and also no recent hospitalization to treat heart failure symptom or heart attack. So those are for the safety as we discussed. And also in order to qualify, patient cannot have any of the following in condition, but not limited to. The first one is any significant heart structural abnormalities, such as a disease of the heart valves, and also unstable heart condition, and or need for the treatment given to the vein for the heart failure treatment at clinic. So for example, such as diuretics. And also last one, certain abnormal blood test, which may prevent safety of the study participant and also effective study conduct. So those are the requirements. Next slide, please.
Wonderful. Sonomi, thank you so much. It's exciting to know that the study has expanded and including more patients. So next, why don't we find out more about this study in detail? And for that, Stacy, if you would walk us through this and what is the Study Connect?
Great, thank you. So I'd like to let you know about a patient platform that can be used to find clinical trials that BMS is running. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what is BMS Study Connect? So this is a platform created for patients, for caregivers, and for health professionals. This website provides information about trials and about the clinical centers that are enrolling the trials. Next slide, please. When you visit BMS Study Connect, you should expect to have a positive experience. Within BMS Study Connect, you'll find a few different things. There's information about clinical trials, so very similar to what we talked about this evening. You'll be able to find additional information about clinical trials and the specific conditions that BMS is currently researching. BMS Study Connect is also able to connect patients to sites through pre-screeners and referrals. And we also hope you feel that BMS Study Connect is engaging with videos and a call center. So I'll go through that in a little bit more detail on the following slides. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, BMS Study Connect has information about the specific trials that BMS is enrolling. The trial that Sonomi just spoke about can be found on BMS Study Connect, and this is called the protocol page. Information that's on this protocol page can also be found on this external platform called clinicaltrials.gov. In addition to finding information about the protocol, you can also find what we call a study participant guide, which gives you information on being a participant in a clinical trial. Generic information, generic information, including informed consent forms, inclusion, exclusion criteria, etc. Next slide, please. So I mentioned referral to a patient site. So BMS Study Connect provides a patient with an opportunity to pre-screen through what we call a pre-screener. So when a patient clicks the link that says, am I eligible? There'll be a series of questions that help the system, the platform, understand what the patient is looking for. And once the questions are answered, a list of trials is shown. And in the event a patient is, in the event BMS does not have a trial that the patient would qualify for, the patient is provided with a list of trials that other sponsors are running. So you would come out of this experience with a list of trials that you as a patient would be eligible, might be eligible for, based on the questions that you've shown. Now you can refer yourself to a site, or you can print out the information and share it with your doctor. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, it talks, so basically then you can print out the information, or you can refer yourself to a clinical center that's near you, and then the site will call you and ask you some additional information and additional questions to determine whether you fit the rules of the trial. BMS Study Connect also has what we call a call center, and there are representatives there that speak English, Spanish, and French. They'll able to help walk you through the completion of a pre-questionnaire. You can communicate via email if you prefer, versus by phone. Next slide, please. So what we have here is we have a link linking you directly to the protocol page for the Danicamtiv trial that Sonomi just spoke to you about. If you put your phone on this QR code, it'll take you directly to the protocol page. However, if you prefer, you can use www.bmsstudyconnect.com, and that'll link you directly to the BMS Study Connect homepage, and you can search under cardiovascular clinical trials. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks, Stacy. Very helpful information. I just want to let people know that I will also provide the links, the phone number, etc., all the information about how to access the study in the email that I send out with the webinar recording. So again, a huge thank you to BMS and for all of their support. Thank you to Stacy and Sonomi for your presentations tonight. Thank you to Christy for helping us. We'll now open up the Q&A. We do have some questions that have come in, and I will take a look at those. And any questions that we don't get to tonight, by the way, we will attempt to answer in a follow-up email. This is an interesting question. Are study timeframes shorter in other countries or continents, such as the EU, compared to the US, or are they the same length of time? Is that for Sonomi?
Sorry, Jaya, would you mind repeat the question? Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. they're asking if study timeframes are shorter in the EU compared to the US, or if they're about the same length of time.
Oh, thank you so much. So for this study, we are using the same study protocol. So that the study treatment, assessment, those are all same globally currently. For the study team in each region, yes, their preparation duration may differ, but for the study participant, it's the same.
Okay, and about how long does participation take in this part of the study?
Yes, so for the study, study has usually a screening, so the people who sign the informed consent start like a process to check the condition if their condition meet that study requirement to participate or not. So that will be for certain duration. And then after that, the study investigational treatment will be given. So for this study, there are two parts. So the first part is up to 22 days. And also second part, which is up to 96 weeks. So it's up to the participant, but yes, participate for the long entire duration or beginning. So that information you can discuss with study sites doctor once you reach the process of the informed consent.
Okay, great. No, that's good to know. Will I need to stop my current treatment when I participate in a research study or this study? Stacy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the answer really depends on the trial and what the trial requirements are. Again, going back to those rules and to what we call inclusion and exclusion. Most of the time, or generally, patients are allowed to continue the treatment that they're taking to treat their disease. So most of the time, what we call background treatment is allowed to continue.
Okay, great. We have an interesting question. Are heart transplant recipients automatically excluded from this trial?
Yes, so
Go ahead.
I think it's for me. So for these details, I'd like to encourage to go to the BMS Connect and also find more information there. And also, if you couldn't find it, please consider to reach out to the study sites to know more details.
Okay, wonderful. There's a question about why Titan cohorts would not be included in this study. Will there be another study to include Titan mutation in the future? And it sounds like Titan mutations have been included in this study previously, and now it's being opened up broader. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yes. Yes, so we already had the Titan cohort. So that cohort was for the DCM patient who had like a Titan mutation. So for the future, unfortunately, I cannot say yes, it will be. We are studying this study, investigational drug in ongoing study. So we are very carefully looking at the data and make a decision. Yes, later.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. We have time for a couple more. Let's see. Can multiple members of the same family be in this study?
Yes, for this study, up to 3 family members with the same gene mutation can participate if each of the member meets the criteria for the study entry. Yes.
Okay, great. And an interesting question, and I probably would have this same question if I were in the trial. If the trial drug is helping improve my symptoms, can I stay on the medication after the trial ends?
Yes. So yes, that's a very good question. And then unfortunately, no, you cannot take study drug after you finish the study. So reason is because the study drug in a research is only available for the duration of the clinical trial because this is investigational drug and also not yet approved by the health authority.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if I can fit in another one or two. Stacy, this one's for you. Where can I find other clinical trials for cardiomyopathy caused by different gene variants? I think you covered this briefly, but if you could mention it again.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So like BMS Study Connect is a really good resource for helping to identify any trials you may be or potential participant to be eligible for. So I would start there. DCM Foundation has awesome information about clinical trials, so that would be another resource. And then clinicaltrials.gov will provide additional information as well, but also want to note that BMS Study Connect pulls information from clinicaltrials.gov. And like I said, if you don't qualify for a BMS trial, you will still be provided with a list of other studies that you may qualify for. So BMS Study Connect is really a great patient platform, and I encourage you all to just, go there and check it out.
Yeah, it sounds very helpful, certainly. Again, any questions that we didn't get to tonight, I will work behind the scenes to try to get answers to those in the next couple of days. So thank you for all of your questions. Again, thank you to all of tonight's presenters and speakers. We really appreciate you all being here. And thank you to Bristol Myers Squibb. We couldn't do this without your support. So to learn more about dilated cardiomyopathy, please visit dcmfoundation.org. To learn more about genetic testing for cardiomyopathy patients, please visit geneticcardiomyopathy.org. Again, that's geneticcardiomyopathy.org. It's a relatively new website. It's a huge initiative this year, and we'd love for you to go there and check that out. And if you do have any questions, you can also email us at info@dcmfoundation.org. Next slide, please. Thank you to all of our sponsors whose names you see there on the screen. They provide us support all year long, and we greatly appreciate them. Next. And we ask that you please save the date for our next webinar, which will be Wednesday, June 21st. Where is the year going? At 6 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic will be cardiomyopathy, genetics, and you. And additional information will be available on our website tomorrow. And I will also send some of that information to sign up for that in the email with the webinar recording from tonight. So again, thank you so much to all of tonight's presenters and Christy as moderator. And thank you to Justine for helping us behind the scenes. Thank you to all of the wonderful patients and participants tonight. And we do encourage you to go check out and see if there may be a clinical research study that's right for you that you could participate in. And you can be a part of the solution to maybe find therapies that people can use to treat dilated cardiomyopathy in the future. So thank you so much. Again, have a great night, be well, and we will see you next time. Okay, take care now. Bye-bye.